It should be a central goal of U.S. policy to support the democratic opposition in Iran, and the U.S. should be prepared to do so with as much aid as is required and without any concessions to the Iranian regime. We've seen both before and during the Ahmadinejad presidency that we get precious little in return for appeasing the current Iranian government. Military might, strategic postures, security agreements, intelligence activities, and all those other tools of my profession aside, I'm telling you that the single most telling strategic lever we have against this Iranian regime is a well-organized and legitimate democratic opposition that has the muscular support of both the U.S. and Europe. But first, let me touch on the important strategic issues in my field. It's very useful to recognize that since the end of World War II, it has been an important, if not a vital, American interest to preserve a balance of power in the Gulf. And when I served in government, we recognized that since the revolution in Iran, there had only been two real counterweights to Iranian pressure, hegemonic ambitions, and revolutionary export, and that was Iraq and the U.S. Saddam's Iraq as a local geopolitical counterweight to Iran for many years is not in any doubt. It's not a value judgment, it's just a fact. And when the U.S. removed Saddam from power in 2003, the U.S. was left as the only geopolitical counterweight to Iran. And despite the huge amount of American forces we had in the region, the notion by 2004, 2005, 2006 that the U.S. was tied down in a very tough period in Iraq, Iranian attempts to exert active military or paramilitary influence through Shiite factions in Iraq and Hezbollah in Lebanon, especially during the 2006 war, an Iranian charm offensive with its Arab neighbors, and the self-perception of the Arab countries of the Gulf Cooperation Council of their own military weaknesses in key areas left the regional balance of power more fragile than we would have liked. But what we really needed, given where Iranian pressure was an updated policy that took into account less obvious but perhaps more insidious ways of threatening a neighbor or undermining their freedom of action: nuclear bullying, terrorism, harassment, fomenting internal problems, and the like. But Iran remains an enormous strategic challenge to regional and even global stability. If this particular Iranian regime is left unchecked in its nuclear ambitions, unchecked in its ambitions to destabilize the region through proxy organizations, unchecked in its support for terrorism or in exporting its revolutionary theocratic fervor, then the Gulf region and by extension the world has a very big problem. So looking at this whole situation, as U.S. and even European policymakers look at all their options, they have to examine their entire kit bag of tools. And diplomatic pressure from the UN and the major powers, including sanctions, has had some effect, but I think we all have to recognize it has not fundamentally changed the behavior of the regime or aided regime change. Military options from the U.S. and the coalition forces in the region are very extensive, and much could be done militarily to pressure the regime well short of anything resembling an invasion or even a limited incursion against Iran. However, and here's where the explicit goals of your organizations and U.S. security aims coincide, a potent democratic opposition in Iran that has the unified support of Europe and the U.S. is a key element. Now, all these elements of policy should be seen as synergistic and part and parcel of one goal: to see a free and peaceable democratic Iran replace a belligerent and militant theocracy. A free, peaceful, and non-nuclear Iran will be able to say goodbye to military confrontations with the U.S. and its neighbors, international sanctions, and the like. And I hope that the democratic opposition in Iran can make this point known to and accepted by their supporters.